Now let's set up our pop network and see how this looks. I'm gonna keep them. Actually, let's turn on the prep robot. It should load faster. So this is visible. So this way we can have a better idea of what's going on. This is pretty much already set up for us. Let me just delete this merge. We're not going to need it. We have our pop object, which will contain the actual geometry of the simulation. And then we have the source first input. But here we do need to change the emission type from scatter onto surfaces to all points. As you can see, this is considering all points. I'm not gonna want to see the guides, and it's already being calculating the geometry. And even though it's our first frame, we're already seeing the particles that are going to be emitted because of the, if you go here to birth, you'll see that the jitter birth time, if we put this to none, then we don't have any, but we will see that we get kind of slices of particles being emitted. By turning on the jitter birth time positive, the particles are placed or are being born in different positions based on their velocity. Now let's see how this is looking. I'm gonna hit D on the viewport, go to geometry, and let's have a look at this as pixels. We do have quite a lot of particles, and this is what's being emitted. Okay, as you can see, there's a change in direction because they are facing the following the target, so they kind of go down a bit more. Let's adjust the life expectancy 1.5, 0.5 as a starting point. Probably still too much, but we'll get there. By default, the attributes are being loaded from the points that are being there are our source, and we also have a scale here to inherit velocity. It's probably too fast. Let's go with 0.5, maybe 0.6. Yeah, this should be enough. Let's bring in the robot and see how the collision is actually working. So let's create a static object, place a merge. Let's adjust the merge position, connect it here, static, and Shift R just to switch, because by default this is set up effector relationship left input, affect right input, and yeah, it's a default, so I tend to keep it. On the static object, let's get our prep robot in here, sub object. So we no longer actually need to see this. And it is user-forming geometry. We need to bring this up. And let's see how this works. Okay, it hits the robot and it pretty much explodes all over the place. If we have a look at this from the back, you'll see that the issue that I was mentioning before is already happening a bit. Camera 2 will show you that. So most of the particles are being deflected that way. So you might need to adjust the target position. Just make sure that upon the first impact, we do have some particles going this way as well. At least more than what we have right now. It's an easy thing to adjust for us because we do have a handy target. Let's make this kind of visible. Hit enter. And on the first frame, let's just kind of nudge it a bit more towards this side. Maybe slightly up. Let's see how that works. Okay. Let's go to that camera. Still mostly going towards that side. Maybe slightly up. And then at this point, again, more towards the center of it. I think this should help. There it goes. It explodes all over the place. No, I think this is good enough. Velocity direction variation is kind of a bit too much. So let's reduce it a bit so it's a bit more concentrated. I like this kind of reaction a bit more. Definitely feel the push. And once we have this, let's start making some adjustments to the actual simulation. So I'm going to go inside, and the first thing I want to do is make sure that the particles don't bounce as much. Right now they hit and they bounce quite a lot, so let's reduce the bounce on the static object to 0.1. One option we have to kind of contain the explosion of the particles as well is the time scale. So let's bring the time scale 0.8. 0.8 just means that the simulation will evolve a bit slower, so they won't be scattering as much. And let's see more. Let's see how much difference this is making. Yeah, already much less explosion. Still being bounced a bit too much towards that side. That's not great. Yeah, this is the point where it's kind of more interesting from the back. Definitely. The beginning is being deflected way too much to that side. So let's try to fix it again. Okay, so this definitely kind of scatters it a bit more. Kind of a weird shape as well, but this won't be the final shape. That's for sure. So one last try. Next frame. I think this is probably the most successful one, and here as well. So let's go with this. And here on the set velocity, I am gonna kind of go back a bit from the concentric option so that it's not as concentrated. And I think this may have helped us a bit, getting rid of that single-sided ricochet effect. Yeah, I think this is a good option. So we'll stick to this for now and see how things evolve from here. Okay, so we have our initial setup for the particles. We've adjusted the target accordingly to have a nice shape on the collision. And on the next lesson, we'll continue to kind of refine the behavior of the particles